Hi, this is Ms. Park, and in this video we're going to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So quadratic formula is a tool that we're going to use when the equation doesn't factor, right? We've already learned how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. Well, what happens if it doesn't factor, right? If it's not factorable? So we have a new tool. Let's just do a quick recap of solving quadratic equations in other ways. So example one, what if I said to you x squared minus 25 equals 0? Okay, so this will be solved. Okay, x squared minus 25 equals 0. Well, probably the easiest way to solve this is to bring the 25 to the other side, and you have x squared equals 25. And now we're going to take the square root of both sides, but we're going to remember that when we take the square root of a number, we actually have two answers. So we put the plus and minus because 5 squared is 25, but negative 5 all squared is also 25. So the solutions to here are actually two answers. Okay, so that's one way to solve. Now, another way to solve the same question is solving by factoring. So this is called by factoring, and this is called by rearranging. Okay, and so if you solve this by factoring, you would do this. I'm going to factor the left side. The left side is a difference of squares. So I'm going to factor it, difference of squares, into x plus 5 and x minus 5. And solving by factoring says if I have two quantities and they multiply to make 0, the only way that that can happen is if one of them is 0. So either x plus 5 equals 0 or x minus 5 equals 0. In the case on the left, x would equal to negative 5. In the case on the right, x equals 5. And that gives us the same two solutions as method 1 by rearranging. All right, so if you can rearrange, if you just have an x squared and a number, and you can rearrange, then go ahead and do that. It's the fastest. And if you can factor, then that's also nice and fast. But what happens if you can't rearrange and you can't factor? So let me do, for example, x squared plus 10x plus 6 equals 0. Right? To factor this, I would have to find two numbers that multiply to 6 and add to 10. And we're not going to find that, right? What goes into 6? 1 times 6, 2 times 3. That's it. There's no combination that adds to 10. So what are you going to do? Well, we do have another tool called completing the square. So I'll show you how to solve this by completing the square. It's kind of neat. It goes like this. Let's complete the square on this thing on the left side. So I'm going to group these two first terms. Right? I'm going to group them. Leave the 6 behind. There's my equal 0. And I have to add a fake term that's going to create a perfect square trinomial. So how do you figure out that fake term? Well, you take your 10, divide it by 2, so you get 5, and then square it. So that's plus 25, and then you got to take away the 25 right away again. Right? So it's like adding 0. Now, this trinomial in the front can be written as x plus 5 all squared. And then I got minus 25 and plus 6 equals 0. And I get x plus 5 squared minus 19 equals 0. And look, I've just completed the square the way we did when we were trying to find the maximum or minimum. But now, this is a solving question. This is solved by completing the square, which means it has to end with x equals. So I'm going to try to isolate my x. Now I'm going to do the rearranging. Okay, so I'm going to rearrange to isolate x. Everything that has x to isolate x. Everything that has x stays on the left. Everything that doesn't stays on the right. So now I have x plus 5 squared equals 19. I'll take the square root of both sides, and I get x plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 19. And then x will equal to, I'm going to bring the 5 over to the other side, becomes negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 19. And that's actually the solution. Like if you put those back into the original equation, if you sub those back in, you're going to get 0, right? And what it means with the plus minus, it really means that x equals negative 5 plus root 19, or x equals negative 5 minus root 19. So again, you get two answers, which is what we expect when we're solving these quadratic equations. Okay, so what's this quadratic formula I'm talking about? So this completing the square is actually a long process, and we don't really, like to do it too often. It's probably one of the hardest ways to solve an equation. So the quadratic formula looks like this, and we can use this when the expression doesn't factor. Okay, so factoring is always easy. Well, it's not easy, but it's like fast. But if it doesn't factor and you can't use that, then you can use a quadratic formula. And it goes like this. If you want to solve ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then the quadratic formula says that x, your solution, is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing, over 2a. Yep, that's right. That's the formula. So you need to know this formula, okay? And the best way to memorize something is to use it a lot, so it commits it to memory, okay? So we need to know this. So let's do some example. Let's do an example with quadratic formula. I'm going to go, so for example, this will be like the last one. 2x squared plus 7x plus 3 equals 0. I'm going to solve it once by factoring, and then I'm going to solve it with quadratic formula. Okay, so by factoring, I have 2x squared plus 7x plus 3 equals 0. I'm just going to use trial and error real quick instead of decomposition. I need these two terms to multiply to 2x squared. I need the other two terms to multiply to 3. Let's check if I expand, will I get 7x in the middle? And I will. I see 2x times 3, 1 times x, that is 7x. I can put my pluses in and I'm done. And now 2x plus 1 equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0. So in this case, 2x is negative 1, x is negative 1/2, in the other case, x is negative 3. Using the quadratic formula, it looks like this. My a, this is my a value, this is my b value, and this is my c value. Quadratic formula says that x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Yep, got to remember it. And so x is equal to negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3, all divided by 2 times 2. So you have to put those numbers into the formula. Now I'm going to simplify. This is negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 4 times 2 times 3 is 24 over 4. And let's simplify this. This is negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 4. And let's keep simplifying. That's negative 7 plus or minus the square, just 5 over 4. And so now I see I have two answers. X is equal to negative 7 plus 5 over 4, or x is equal to negative 7 minus 5 over 4. Okay, in the case of the one on the left, x is equal to negative 7 plus 5 is negative 2, and that simplifies to negative 1/2. On the other side, this is negative 12 over 4, which simplifies to negative 3. And you can see it's the same answers I got as solving by factoring. So you get the same answers, right? Which is good. Now, why do we care if factoring was so fast and quadratic formula is so long? Why do we care? Well, sometimes you can't factor, right? So if you can't factor, use quadratic formula. Okay, so if I go back to that other example from before and I go x squared plus 10x plus 6 equals 0, there's no way to factor that. So I'm going to go x is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Yep, got to remember it. And so x is equal to negative 10 plus or minus square root of 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6 over 2 times 1, which is negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 100 minus 24 over 2. 100 minus 24 is 76. So this is negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 76 over 2. And that's your answer. That's actually two answers, negative 10 plus root 76 over 2 and negative 10 minus root 76 over 2. Okay, and so for those of you who might want to work ahead a little bit, this square root of 76 can actually be simplified, and this is more of a grade 11 thing, but the number 76 is actually 4 times 19. So this is square root of 4 times the square root of 19, which is really 2 times the square root of 19, because square root of 4 is a whole number. So what I have is negative 10 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 19 over 2. And I can see that every term in this expression can be divided by 2. So I get negative 5 plus or minus square root of 19. And I've divided all three pieces by 2, and that's why I'm left here. And that's the same answer we got earlier in the video when I did the same question. Okay, only this time I got it by quadratic formula. So this over here is called simplifying radicals. Okay, we're not going to focus on it here in grade 10. If you know how to do it, great. And if you don't know how to do it, it's okay. You can leave the answer the way it was with the 76. But your answers in the textbook might be simplified. So this is why it's kind of important to know how to simplify it, but you won't be required to simplify it. Okay, so that's the quadratic formula. You're going to need to learn the formula. Please write it every time you use it. Write the formula first before you put the values in. That's the fastest way to check for mistakes. Okay, please practice. Thanks for watching.